Hello, everybody, and welcome again to your favorite podcast, The Unattached. She is Theresa Rezga,
He's Ryan Stanley.
and we are here for episode 9. Today, we are going to go back to, on some level, our original theme of attachment and unattachment.
Well, the name of the podcast is The Unattached, so
Occasionally, we like to bring it back full
it's
circle.
kind of a thing.
Specifically, though, the level of attachment to something that you may be, and this is a conversation that we started shortly before this, so feel free to dive in here, Teresa, but really the concept that whether it be attached to not necessarily a person or a particular outcome, but more of something that you're creating or developing, or maybe an outcome that you are intending to create or experience. At one point, when you haven't gotten there yet, do you stop?
Basically, how do you know when to walk away?
Right. At what point do you say, okay, this isn't serving me? It's not that I'm never going to get there. I mean, maybe it might that I'm never going to get there.
Be it a relationship, a job, anything, a goal, whatever the case might be. Because if you're not attached to it, and you're not attached to the outcome, and you are unattached, what does it matter?
At what point does it become giving up as opposed to making a better choice or a different choice that serves you better?
But then wouldn't you be attached to the outcome of the next choice anyway? So you're kind of trading one attachment for another?
Absolutely. Possibly. But it depends on how attached you are to that second outcome.
And the first one.
Right. So you're not necessarily trading one as... And, that's something we've been, I think in episode 6.
In our future episode 29.
Yeah, actually, episode 87. But yeah, I mean, because one of my biggest challenges is that I believe in create. Like, I believe that we create our futures, and I believe that we can put things out there into the universe, and if we focus on them on a daily basis and take action on them, they will be created, right? So at what point do you decide do I decide that that's an attachment versus an intention, right? I think that's what I'm referring to. We talked about the difference between an attachment and an intention.
Well, also, how do you know what to attach to? Like, I have an issue sometimes being grounded. Like seeing, you talk about co-creating or creating your life. I have trouble at times I don't know how to create I don't see a future. Like I don't know what's next. So I don't have, how do you know when to attach to something? And when also to walk away from it.
Yeah. I think, well, I guess, is there ever a time to attach to something theoretically?
Well,
right?
Goal, a person in a relationship, a job, like you're spending the hours and moments and seconds of your life on these things.
Right. And human, I get it. I mean, I am that guy. Don't worry. I'm not saying, but I'm saying theoretically speaking, if you were still having a job but were not attached to any of the above, as you just mentioned, not attached to the outcome, but they were still part of your existence, but you really could care less. Like the next day you could be fired, broken up with, and whatever the third thing you mentioned, all at the same time, and nothing would be different emotionally for you. That would be the unattached version.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you wouldn't still be in that relationship and enjoy being present with them, or be at that job and enjoy either the work or the finances that are, given in response to your work there.
But so enjoying the experience of whatever it is, be it relationship, job, what have you, example further. So enjoying the experience
Would
of
you say
that,
etc.?
etc. So enjoying the experience of it in that present experience, like in the moment of now, but at the prospect of loss and the actuality of losing,
right,
job, relationship, etc., there is no feeling of loss or sadness
or stress.
But if you're unattached and you're enjoying stress, yeah, that makes sense. I was going backward, not forward into, yeah. But so do you just wait for things to happen then? Do you wait to be broken up with? Do you wait to get fired? Do you wait for etc.? Or do you create etc.? And I know you're going to say you create it. Bing,
right.
bing, bing.
Bada bing.
There it is. How do you know when to...
shift gears, maybe?
Yeah.
I agree. So I think depends on the situation. So let's use work and let's say you are making this up as I go along. Let's say you work at a job that you don't hate, but it's not your passion.
Yeah.
Right? You like people you work with. You go to work every day. It's not terrible. It's not your passion. Paycheck is fine. And you're creating a business on the side, right? So you got your own business. It's a t-shirt business.
Are we talking about you?
Let's just say you've got this podcast with a friend.
Let's just say your name is Ryan Stanley.
Hypothetically speaking.
You're
living in New Jersey.
In an example scenario.
No, but getting back to your point, I guess I'm saying if you are attached to your job,
yeah.
What point do you decide that it's not serving you anymore? Is that the question?
Well, I guess, but doesn't that involve like a deep level of attachment to what is serving you and what's not?
Well, a lot of the time people will say, it's like, oh, I hate my job. Well, why do you work there? Oh, because it's money.
Yeah, but you can get money everywhere. Like I found 11 cents on the sidewalk this morning. Awesome. 11 cents, a dime and a penny.
I was going to ask exactly, was there two nickels?
No. What are the odds of that? I found 11 pennies laid out
I found a nickel and 6 pennies. There was a hay penny there. That might be a little extra.
It's worth 5. Yeah, and the buffalo nickels are, depending on who you talk to, they used to be worth 7 cents, but you never know.
With the economy.
Used to be into coins.
Nice.
Still am a little bit. It's kind of a thing.
A little on the side.
I don't know. Don't tell anyone.
I'll keep it on the DL.
Gotcha.
We digress. I'm going to start over on the example.
Okay.
Let's say you're at a job that you don't like.
Sure.
Right? And you're there every day, but it pays you a lot of money. Like ridiculous amount of money.
Boku bucks.
Yeah. Whatever that means to you. At what point do you decide that I'm not attached to the money anymore? Right? Is that kind of what you're saying? At what point do you walk away and say, this isn't serving me? Part of it is serving me, but part of it is definitely not.
I mean, I understand that if you don't like your job, but you make a lot of money, you're basically selling your soul.
Right.
If what you're doing does not feed who you are, you're selling your soul. To me, it's like a no-brainer. If you're not impassioned by what you do day in and day out. I mean, granted, we've talked about this. I love my job. I get to talk to people for a living. It's pretty cool. Yeah. And everything is a new conversation, and I love the exploration of like new people, new conversations. And we, as admissions coaches, get to really talk to some pretty cool people with some really interesting stories.
To say the least.
Yeah, right? So, that's a really cool thing. There are aspects of my job that I'm not the biggest fan of, like cranking through 100 emails.
Right.
Asking questions. And granted, we have, taken steps to like be able to empower people to get those questions on their own. And here's my calendar link, schedule time so we could just talk. But the overall there is that I really get to do what I love every day, all day, from anywhere on the planet.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, even though I love it, at what point do you detach to serve a greater purpose? Even if, it's a no-brainer to me when you say, oh, if you don't like your job but you make a lot of money, I'm a big proponent of, hey, you sell your soul, but I get it. Everybody has different priorities and prerogatives. But usually, in a scenario like that, where the pain outweighs the gain, is usually when people leave or when they reach a goal that they've set. So in finance, you'll see a lot of times they'll spend a couple years in, we're talking like big banks.
Yeah.
I know investment banking is kind of dead, but you'll work like crazy hours for 4 or 5 years into your mid to late 20s. And then usually you see a lot of brokers, stockbrokers too, and then they quit and they walk away with all this money and then they go do something they're passionate about. So there was a goal,
right.
Get in, make your money, get out.
Work hard, get up past it.
Yeah, other people, they'll sit in a job until they're miserable for 20 years or even a year, whatever the case might be, until it literally gets to the point where it's so bad that they're cornered. They have no other option or feeling than to move on.
And that's actually not what we were talking about before we started this conversation.
No, it's not.
Right.
It's not. But when you're saying, like, what if you don't like your job? To me, it's like there's
right.
a fail-safe there.
Yeah.
It's like you either have a goal or,
no, I agree.
When the pain gets so bad. But what if you're, like, you have a decent job, like, you're not unhappy, but you're not happy, but you're just kind of floating? Like, where does that...
Like, at what point...
And this is relationships, friendships. You see that pile of unread mail that you just kind of have to go through, or the clutter that's been on your cabinet for... I don't know, weeks, the drawers that are just unorganized and things like that. At what point do you make a change, period? Be it walk away, And we initially started the conversation with, at what point do you walk away?
Yeah.
But really, I guess the real question, now that we're talking it out, is at what point do you really make a change?
And I think you actually alluded to it already.
Did I?
You did.
Tell me more.
Well, the people who reach a point when it becomes more painful to, what's the saying? The day he blossomed was the day that it became more painful to remain a bud than it was to blossom.
Never heard that one. I was all about the butterfly as a kid.
Yeah, I'll put it in. I'm actually misquoting it, I'm sure. And it's by somebody named Asi something. I'm also butchering his name.
Mr. Man,
dude. Yeah, I'll find it for you. Maybe I'll put it in. Hey, listen, if you follow us on social media, I'll put it in the link on our Facebook page.
If and only if.
Yeah, and maybe I will tweet it as well. But anyway, I think when you make that change is when you come to a point where you've decided that the pain is stronger than the benefit. And the challenge comes when people are shrouded in fear of what the benefit, without the benefit, where would they would be? Meaning, if I have a job with a great pension and a great health insurance and all these things that I know are going to take care of future Ryan, but I hate it. Now, this is not really me, but many people will stay in there taking care of future Ryan.
Because of the whole false sense of security. Or their perceived sense of like financial stability and security.
Or they've been raised their entire life to say this is what you do. You go get a job and you work there for 60 years and then you make sure that's taken care of and then you leave.
So it's interesting because a lot of times when I hear a conversation like this, or like, there's this example thrown around, it's usually around work or a relationship.
Yeah.
But think about habits and think about preferences and behaviors and types of people and scenarios that we put ourselves in. Like, I feel like it's the same thing. Like, you see people who are like, oh, I definitely want to make a shift, I want to make a change, and they do, but then they have these times where they just fall back. Right. And I'm kind of at a struggle with that a little bit too, because it's like, look, do you want this? Like,
interested versus committed.
Absolutely. So it's funny because I say this to people, and I've said this to you, and you said it to me. I don't, in scenarios where, remember when I'm like, you don't get to be like that anymore. You've decided. You've told me you're committed. You don't get to be lazy with your personal development. You don't get to be lazy and quote unquote take a day off from being awesome. You be awesome all the time because that's who you are.
That's who you've already decided to be.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because, a lot of times, like I said, the example is a job, a relationship, a thing. But a lot of times I think also it's behavior, it's thought pattern, it's the scenarios, the words that people use, the way they even speak or dress.
Well, our thoughts are extremely powerful. Words and thoughts. Sometimes if we can speak them appropriately.
The expansive lexicon you got going on.
I'm working on it. Baby steps.
I got a thesaurus with your name on it, buddy.
Thank you very much. What's another word for thesaurus?
Book of many words with many meanings? I got nothing.
It's always like that. But yeah, I mean, the most interesting thing about that
Everybody's a comic.
Except for me.
You were saying.
I think the most interesting thing about that, it is about habits. But it's, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So
I love that phrase.
Yeah. So if people believe they're committed, but they're not, right? They really are just interested.
Yeah.
That's where the danger happens, and that's where people get stuck, and that's where people don't move forward.
That's where one of the walkaway points for me with people in like friendships, relationships, associations, and affiliations is when I realize someone is just interested, not committed. To me, that's like a red flag. Like, you're going to infect me. Like, you're going to make me sick with your, like, whatever you got going on. I don't want to be interested. I'm committed. Get away from me. I might catch it.
But to the point of earlier, when I was talking about, like, their work, it's like, people, if you're raised your entire life to think, hey, I go get a job, I'm going to work there for 60 years, get my pension, move on. If you're raised to behave that way based on example, it doesn't mean you can't change it or shift it. So I'm not making it an excuse.
Yeah.
As much as it's how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if their whole life, their examples and the people they surround themselves with and their parents or their influencers are doing exactly that and just, well, maybe this, maybe that.
And not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
But it's also a choice for like me to choose to be around that person. It's a difference of values and a difference of what's acceptable and what's not,
Yeah. So in that case,
sure.
when do you walk away? So let's just say, and I'm taking it back to the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm going to be a bodybuilder, and so I say I'm committed, and I change my diet, and I start working for like a year. Let's say 2 years, right? I mean, that's a long time compared to what most people do.
Okay. Bodybuilding
Not,
is a
I know
really
it's a lifetime.
long-term
Right,
kind
well,
of a
listen,
thing.
right.
Yeah.
I understand that.
You're,
So
yeah.
I might not be using
cool.
the best example.
It's all good.
But I'm just saying my point is, so, but then after 2 years, you don't feel like doing it anymore every day.
Sure.
And you decide that you're not going to call yourself lazy, but you're just not into it anymore. But you feel like, okay, 2 years ago I made a commitment to do this and get to this point, but I'm not, I'm not feeling it. I'm not excited. Is it a wave? How long does that last? What point do you say this is just not for me anymore?
Well, there's a couple things here, right? So it's giving yourself permission to change
Yep.
and exist and that. And then it's also, well, what did you really commit to? A lot of times you'll see people who get into that kind of thing after a major tragedy or a loss or a life-changing thing, and it's usually they're committing to themselves. They're proving that they can keep a commitment to themselves. And they're committing to their own health and wellness sometimes too. So it's like, okay, so what are you really committing to? Giving yourself permission to choose something different going forward. And then also, I mean, values change. And I get that.
100%. Well, that's where this question came from. So at what point does it become a, giving up versus
letting go?
Yeah, letting go and shifting gears and shifting paths and deciding that it's not serving you anymore.
In your experience, what is it for you?
I don't know. It's actually it's an important question for me, because typically for me, it's not about giving up. I don't really give up as much as I put things on hold and
permanently.
No.
Indefinitely.
Oh, and look for opportunities, but
Okay.
don't spend 10 hours a day focusing on them.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So for you, it's lack of a better way to put it, I guess like a do nothing mentality, or just don't focus on that mentality. Focus elsewhere versus, I guess I got a better way, I think, and this was actually said to me in the past. So you have all these doors of opportunity, and instead of closing the door that you're kind of looking into and working on and focusing on, you're not closing it, you're just looking at other doors now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm seeing other doors.
Sorry, it's not you.
It's your handle.
There's a lot of other doors out there.
Your hinges squeak.
Please.
I can see that. I'm actually learning that now, because in the past, like, I release all attachment to something in my mind before
You make that final cut.
Yeah, like think about a breakup. Like, I broke up with you weeks ago in my mind and in my heart, but I'm just like, it's a processing. Mike Burning, one of our coaches, he calls it defrag mode. It's like where you just let yourself sit with it, and all of a sudden all the fragments that are all over the place start to align because you don't think about it.
Right.
So for me, and same thing with the job, and I usually have, it's like, I guess it's for me, it you know what, talking about it, it's intuitive. It's just, and I guess, like, I realize after the fact that I let go weeks ago, and I've already moved on to whatever's next. So, like, even with jobs, I remember just, I already have like 6 offers. Like,
I checked
I'm
that
out.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite.
So I guess it's a practice of that door example. But you were gonna say?
No, I was gonna say there's a Family Guy episode where, like, Peter goes to get a job or to find a job, and so he goes to, like, a job placement agency, and the guy who's working with him just quit his job at the job placement agency. And Peter's like, "Yeah, I'm looking for a job." The guy's like, "Yeah, like, today's my last day. I checked out about 4 hours ago in my brain, so I don't know if we'll find you anything."
That is kind of funny.
It's kind of funny. But it's interesting because it was your initial question was, so when do you know to let go?
For me, it's always in retrospect.
Yeah.
Like, it's intuitive. And, there's certain feelings, I think, and I've experienced them recently, and I haven't experienced those actual feelings since the last time I was in that place of transition and really letting go. And for me, there's a lot of sadness. Like, I feel a lot of loss when I let things go.
Yeah.
But it's like, it really hits hard. Like, I go into full mope, I seclude, I don't want to infect anybody. I like,
Yeah.
like, me. So I don't, I'm just like, look, I gotta be mopey, okay?
Just need my space.
And, like, you either gonna sit and mope with me and it's gonna be awful together, and then like give me just a little bit of time and I'm good. Or I mean, a lot of people just drag the mope on for years. So for me, it's just get it over with. Let your soul feel like it's ripped apart, even though you know it's not.
Yeah. And let the emotion flow through your body. We've talked about how
it's a really deep state of mindfulness. Yeah.
We don't own an emotion. It's not part of us. It's something that comes through.
Yeah, and it doesn't own you. Yeah. It really, the best way, and that really truly is mindfulness, and the best way that mindfulness was described to me, because I did, when I was going through the coach training program, I was also in like really intensive mindfulness therapy. I mean, I just lost my house. Like, oh my gosh, there was so much stuff going on. I was in a terrible relationship, the whole thing. And the way that it was described to me was perfect. And the idea was that, like, you have a house, and there are 2 chairs in this house, and one is for you and one is for your guest. And your guest is whatever emotion you are experiencing. So when that emotion comes in, you have a place for it ready, and it's welcomed. And it's cared for and observed and experienced. And then when it is ready to move on and leave, it is gone. It's a very simple way to put it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but you don't try and keep it, and you don't hang on to it. Right. You don't make it a bed.
Don't go anywhere.
Dep.
Tea is on. I got dinner coming. Don't leave anger.
It's funny because I've told you, like, Ryan, I really wanted to cry today. I really wanted to cry. I can't cry. And then there are other times where I'm like, I'm never a crier, but I can't. Like,
just can't
get that tear. Like,
weeping.
Suck it back in. Yeah. So, it's interesting.
So, do you feel like you have a different answer than to the question that we started with? I mean, do you feel like you have a different understanding?
Yeah, I think I do. For me personally, I know that it's kind of an intuitive thing. I fight sometimes. I fight it. But in retrospect, you can connect the dots looking backward.
So intuitively, you know, like, it's time to change. It's time for a shift.
Yeah.
I'm ready for something different in my life.
It's really usually like, especially,
and I've known for a long time type of a thing, maybe, or
yeah. So usually for me, like, I've known, and there's like, I can logically put the pieces together and be like, okay, like, T-Money, you're really getting to the end of whatever this is, relationship, job, etc. But usually there's a defining moment actually as well, where I'm like, you know what, like, this is it.
That's it.
It really is.
Yeah.
We've talked about this. Yeah. Like, there's literally a thing that someone says or an email that I get. I'm like, you know what? That was the straw.
I got it.
The camel's back is broken. I think we're good here.
And the other side of that is the annoying that there's a lesson in every situation, in every emotion, and no matter what you physically, emotionally, spiritually, how you react to any situation in any of those areas, may not always feel well. Feel good? Might not feel good. I don't know. You know what I'm saying.
One more time from the top.
Yeah. Would not feel well if you are hurting emotionally, physically, spiritually.
Sure.
Based on experience. But at the same time, those are the signs that often, as long as we don't react but we respond, those are the things that when they occur, we can still have the emotion go through us, but choose a reaction based on, as opposed to, choose a response as opposed to a reaction.
Yeah, being able to respond rather than react.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think the other side of that too is the more I've found from my experience, the more intentional we become about being present and being aware of everything that's happening to us at all times, and the abundance of life that is surrounding us, whether it be oxygen, whether it be light, whether it be emotion, whether it be communication, all these different things that are literally happening to us all the time, and most people, including myself, don't always think about. But to take an experience and to really appreciate it for a powerful experience that it may be, even from an emotional standpoint, to then walk away, not even just looking for the lesson, but just that experience of feeling something that you hadn't felt in a long time, or, you know, what it means to actually be human, whether it be to love or to hate or to be sad, you know, sorrow or whatever it is. When you start to appreciate those experiences for what they are, and not necessarily from a, we've talked about gratitude in the past. No, I'm so grateful that I was an emotional wreck. You know, it's not necessarily that. That's a different also thing. That's also a different thing that can serve you, but that's not what I'm referring to now, as much as I'm referring to the actual feelings, and not necessarily gratitude, but the lessons that come from them. It's like, wow, I really experienced that. So if somebody says, oh, I never want to be sad, I never want to cry, I never want to be so frustrated that I'm yelling at somebody. I think when you really truly experience those and are patient and present in them, you understand a different level of humanity.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think, there's always the responsive rather than reactive. So not necessarily being the person who's angry and screaming at somebody else who cut them off or whatever the case might be, but really just appreciating someone else's anger and appreciating the experience of that. Not necessarily being on the quote unquote receiving end, like you're not receiving their anger, you're just experiencing it and it's just flowing around you, not, or maybe through you, but you're not holding on to it. And it's really interesting. I was talking to a friend the other weekend. We were talking about trauma, and it was something that came up actually in a couple conversations over the past couple weeks with different people, which was unexpected. But the idea that when you experience trauma, you really are opened to a level, a breadth and depth of emotion that you weren't previously. So you're literally building your emotional capacity. You're building your emotional comfort zone as well. And the
you
more...
mean, I'm sorry, just for my own clarity, before, during, or after the trauma is what you're talking about right
really
now.
all of the... Well, I guess during, but like after, the after effect of trauma, a lot of times, and this is not in every case, obviously, of course, but is that you build a greater emotional capacity. So when you lose someone, you experience a sorrow and that depth of grief and loss, and for some people despair, all of these different things, that somebody who, may not have had that experience, who's never experienced those things, they can't necessarily relate as well. You can empathize, but you can't really...
Say, oh, I know what
you don't have that.
I know how you feel.
You don't have that in your repertoire.
Yeah.
It's not a skill, quote unquote, like an emotional skill, an emotional capacity that you have. So you'll see, like, I don't know if you know that, like, if you get this feeling, but you can almost tell when you meet somebody that they've had some challenges. And, there's like different kind of challenges, like things that people brought on themselves, like, yeah, I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but like crime or addiction or things that you've chosen to experience versus things that happened in your life. So like loss, like losing a parent or a sibling young or at any age. I mean, that's not something that you chose to do.
Right.
It's something that happened in your life.
Right.
So it's also like, there's that feeling like you weren't in control there.
Helplessness, yeah.
Yeah. So you have this really different emotional capacity that is there for you. So
it's like you've been stretched a little bit to make more room for...
Yeah, and you can see it in people. So like they'll get cut off and like, and then you see other people that are like, I've lost people that are so close to me. I've seen death. This is a Tuesday and it's traffic.
Right.
Or like you see somebody flip out in a restaurant and you're like, like, how is this the thing that's really making you so angry?
Right.
It's an interesting concept. But,
I love it.
That idea of experiencing
the
emotion.
Well, I think all of it plays into when we start to decide that is the life. I mean, that is the experience of life.
Yeah.
And every moment, even when we're not happy about it, is an experience of life. There's an opportunity to be grateful or appreciate or learn from or whatever it is that you want to do from it. But depending on what you're looking to do with your life, you can either ignore it as if it's nothing, or you can decide to appreciate it for what it was, or you can look to see if there's a lesson there to help you move forward or whatever's next.
It's true.
I think interestingly enough, as far as when to walk away from something, for me, I always keep something on the back burner until I have, like, I guess, zero interest in it.
Oh my God, you must have been... I'm just... So many scenarios pop into my mind, but I know what you're talking about.
And I think once you get to that point, for me, it's not even a question anymore. I guess maybe that, and I'm thinking out loud, but to your initial question, it's like, okay, so when I get to a point where to your point, you a lot more eloquently, it's about intuition. Like you've got this point where there's a comfort zone, where you're not questioning yourself. Is this a time to quit? Do I not quit? What is my end result? No, I know this is not serving me. I know that I'm not going. My intention is no longer to accomplish this anyway. So why am I spending my most valuable commodity, which is time, focusing on it?
With someone, something, somewhere.
Right.
That's not serving me.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have a physical, like a visceral reaction to certain things. And like even phrases that I say. If I like literally, I talk to myself a lot. We've talked about this.
Yes, once or twice.
I have a great relationship with Theresa. She's pretty awesome. Yeah. I like hanging out with her.
All right.
She's cool. I'm sure Ryan, you love hanging out with Ryan.
Most of the time.
yourself. Yeah. But like literally, I will say out loud, like, what am I doing here?
Right.
Like, I don't want to be a part of this conversation. Like, there's nothing here for either of us, Or at this job, it's like, why are you paying me? Like,
now here's what's coming up for me.
Yeah.
The challenge between working hard all day, actually I don't like that term, staying focused on whatever it is that you want to do all day long.
Putting in effort.
Yeah.
And time.
Consciously, yeah. And with joy and comfort and whatever.
Sure.
But then it gets down to 10 o'clock at night. And I'm not saying I didn't have a break for dinner and I did some stuff or whatever, but then 10 o'clock at night comes and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm thinking, okay, what could I be doing now instead of sitting here on the couch?
I don't understand how people watch TV.
Well, so I don't
Sorry, I'm just
No.
going to throw that out there.
I mean, I understand how people do, but I'm getting to a point where I really can't even enjoy it anymore. That's
okay,
not true.
that's...
I'm not enjoying it anymore.
Okay.
Because instead of, quote unquote, being present with whatever's entertainment is on, I'm thinking about what I could be doing. And then it's like this weird place of I'm not getting anything done and I'm not in a happy place. I'm not feeding, you know what I mean? Like I'm not feeding positive thoughts in my brain. I'm not focusing on anything. I'm not relaxing because so it's like this weird thing. But at the same time, I also believe that we all need some downtime. And there's or if it's being with somebody.
Yeah.
Right. My intention is to spend time with you, and you want to watch TV, and I know the only way that I'm going to spend time with you is if I'm going to sit down next to you on the couch. I know
that feeling. Yeah. Not necessarily TV, but like people have certain interests and hobbies that literally take over their life, and if you are part of that affiliation with them, you have that's how you see them.
Right.
Is that the thing that they want to do?
Yeah.
But I think. Like, I can relate with the whole TV kind of thing, or really anything where I'm thinking, like, okay, so I'm not enjoying this. I'm not hating it.
Right.
I don't, I could be doing something, like that whole, what you just said, I definitely can relate. And I guess when you say downtime, it's like when people say, oh, I want to let loose, or oh, I want to have fun. You get to define what that actually means.
Right.
And I think, defining that a little bit more is helpful, but you're right, like.
So then it becomes how interested versus committed am I in... at what point do I make... I'm really taking our giant conversation, bringing it to a macro level. So instead of like the long grand scheme of things...
Micro level?
Yeah, same difference.
Oh, okay.
Not really. Bodybuilding for 2 years as opposed to one night. Okay, for the next half hour to an hour, how am I spending my time, right? When do you walk away from sitting on the couch? Or when you walk away, you know what I mean? Like this. So
what a question!
Like when do you walk away and say, okay,
So for me, it's when do I walk away from a book? Like The Old Man and the Sea. I have tried to read that book, and people are like, oh, it's a literary classic. I can't get through it, and it's not a long book, and it's got a lot of pictures in the version that I have.
Nice.
So like there really is that question. And you were the one that were like, well, just stop it. Right. I was like, oh, okay. Like
stop reading it.
Yeah. So that's a really poignant question. I think, that's where permission comes in, is permission to say, hey, like when you work out a lot. So I used to do CrossFit, like a lot. And I was, there would be days I would do 2 a days, and then I'd go for a run in the middle of the day. And then I'd play soccer or basketball for a couple hours. And it was awesome, but there were definitely days where I was like, ugh. I hurt from the hair down. Like
can't move eyebrow.
My face hurts for no reason. So
does your face hurt though?
I chew a lot of gum these days.
It's killing me.
Oh, everybody's a comic.
Give me a bye. I know. All right.
There it is. High five.
Zinger.
But yeah, giving yourself that permission, and honestly, at some point there needs to be a mental break. But I think people give themselves too many excuses. It's like, oh, this is a little challenging. I need a break. I just want to sit here. I don't really want to think about the world and life that's happening. And I get that. That's just not where I'm at. That's the interested level. I'm at the committed level, and there's nothing wrong with the other.
Right.
But it's just not what jives for me. So I think, to your point, it's basically knowing when to take a break, giving yourself that permission, but not using that as your excuse to not do something over and over and over.
Right.
Or to do something over and over and over.
And at what point does it just become resistance?
Or just laziness.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they're very similar in a lot of... Not always, but...
Yeah. Not mutually exclusive, but definitely relative.
Laziness is typically attributed to some form of resistance Resistance isn't necessarily
laziness. Yeah.
laziness.
Oh, look at us. Getting logical on it.
We're at the 35-minute mark.
What do you want to do here, sir?
I don't know. I think we should call it a day.
Okay, or night. It's a little late.
Evening. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to us today. Hope you got something out of it. I think I did.
Yeah.
I think in the grand scheme of things, I'll sum it up from my perspective. Then
biggest takeaway.
I'd love yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway is and this is actually just coming to me now, the fear of going on too long on some level, and this is only for me, not for everything with all the different concepts, but on some level is about giving a shit what other people think.
Okay.
Right? I've been doing this too long, and I'm afraid that people are going to judge me because it's not as successful as I thought it was going to be by now, and so I'm fearful that they're going to judge me for that, so I'm not continuing to it, either A. And if that's the case, then who gives a shit? Let it keep going and then decide it'll show up when it's supposed to. Or B, listen to your soul. I mean, if you really have, same thing actually on some level, perhaps if I don't want to not do it anymore because I'm afraid what other people are going to think. I'm afraid what my family or my friends are going to judge me because I said I was going to do it and then now I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I think those are both comes from the ego on some level and like fear of judgment. And so when you release all of those and are just stay with what you're passionate about is when you will know what the path is.
Wow.
That's my biggest takeaway.
Very well put.
Thanks. Just literally came from the brains. What do you got?
Came from the brains. I'm like trying to listen to what you're saying, but like in the back of my mind, I'm like, what's my biggest takeaway?
Could be anything.
So I hear you.
Yeah.
I just want you to know.
All right. I
It
appreciate
was very
it.
eloquent. Well put. But for me, biggest takeaway is like, so walking away is difficult for me until it's not. So I think it's really being still and listening. And we talk about like that kind of, the three things, the three ways you can really look at something is logically, intuitively, and emotionally. I learned that in college. And I had someone once basically say, consider all your potential futures. And you do that. That's a logical process, but you can do that with emotion. And I feel like you can also do that with intuition kind of thing. So for me, when all of those things connect in the middle, so logically it doesn't make sense. Intuitively, you just don't feel it. And emotionally,
Nada.
it's destructive.
Yeah.
Or like I have trouble, I let it get destructive. But really, once you know. But all the way up until that point, like I have an opportunity in that leading up point to be more still, listen more, a little less logic possibly, maybe a little more emotional awareness and responsibility and then emotional action, but really kind of checking back into the intuition because, I can get super logical sometimes, like.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think it's really, the biggest takeaway is that.
And now here's the other thing.
Oh no.
Yeah. When you walk away, if you decide based on your trifecta of awesomeness, you decide this no longer serves me, doesn't mean you could never ever go back. Doesn't mean that it's not there anymore.
That's funny because usually when I decide it's done.
I know. But
it is over.
I realize that about you.
Yeah.
I get that concept, and most people are, and there's a lot of power in that.
There's no going back.
I'm just saying that we never know what the path of life will lead to.
This is true.
So, it's not that it will never ever. I think sometimes for any people. I mean, absolutely. I know you. I understand your perspective, but I'm saying sometimes the fear in giving up, quote unquote, or stopping for now, is like that whole attachment piece. Like, oh my gosh, if I stop now, there's nothing ever like this is going to happen again.
Okay, so I struggle with that. Yeah. Because like my mentality.
The finality of it.
Yeah, if I break it off, be it a job, a relationship, etc., it's the end. But I mean, people do pop up. I mean, I'm in my late 20s. Like, I have another at least 60 years ahead of me. At
God
least.
willing.
You never know what could happen.
Yeah.
So I say that now, with like my level of conviction. Like I'm very convicted. When I decide it's done.
Right.
And that's not just to walk away from something, but that also is like I called how many people here at IPEC and told I was like, hey. When I got to
work there.
Yeah, when I got the first the first in-person interview, I basically told them that they would regret it. I remember talking to what's her face. I was like, "You're gonna regret it if you don't hire me, so you might as well."
I'm just saying, let's just get this over with.
Yeah, I'm gonna mess shit up. So, but that was kind of funny the way you put it. But yeah, you're right. Anything could happen at any minute. But the finality of things is usually where I stick.
Yeah, I just meant as an overall, not universal truth, but...
I don't want to talk about universal truth.
Yeah.
We're at 39 minutes, I think.
We'll call it a day.
I might not be able to sleep tonight if we start talking about that.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. She is absolutely the one and only Theresa Hresga.
And he is the remarkable Ryan Stanley.
We are happy to be here for you. We will see you next week.
Have a wonderful week.
Bye.